I'm happy to be here. I'm actually in Toronto today, SQL Saturday Toronto. So I'm presenting Data Bash from Toronto, not your usual Albany, but it's all good. This will be fun. So this is a presentation all about a brand new data type that was kind of snuck into SQL Server, so not a lot of people really know about it. So this is going to be kind of fun. If you use JSON in SQL Server, this will be relevant to you, and you'll be happy to learn about it. If you don't use JSON in SQL Server, you may still find it kind of interesting because it's there, it's useful, and you may need it in the future. So let's just dive right on in, right? Let's have some fun. This is me. I'm Ed Pollack. I do a whole lot in the data platform space. I'm a Microsoft MVP, author, speak at lots of stuff. I organize events. If you're in Albany, New York, anything like that, look me up. We have a user group out there. We have a lot of fun. So that's me. And let's just dive into why we're here. So basically, JSON in SQL Server isn't easy. It never was, XML, JSON, any kind of markups, files, documents, images, anything like that, binary data, all that kind of stuff doesn't really go well in a relational database. So we're going to talk about challenges. I have live demos because I like to live on the edge dangerously. So we'll have some live demo just for fun. And we'll talk a bit about when or when not to use it. And then we're done because this is not like a 2-hour presentation. This is fast and fun, right? That's what we want here. So let's go right on into it. Here's a brief history of JSON in SQL Server. Are there any questions? But this really is a good summary of it. JSON is a huge challenge in SQL Server because it's document. It's a document, it's text, and it's, we have things in SQL Server that can help a little bit with text searching, but in general, it's a big pile of text, and it's not really what relational databases are made for. And so, yes, it's typically been a dumpster fire, and it's usually the intersection of two problems. One problem is you have this vaguely structured text, and then you have developers that want to write software, and then you have a database that isn't meant for any of this. So you get a giant fire, a big mess. So here's our problem. SQL Server is really optimized for a certain type of data: relational, structured, rows, columns, ACID, atomic, consistent, isolated, durable. That's the kind, we talk about transactions, and that's the kind of things we're talking about when we talk about SQL data. We're talking about placing orders and bank transactions and things like that, rows and columns. And JSON is the exact opposite of that. It's unstructured, it's not relational, it's stored in documents, and typically most systems that manage JSON, eventually consistent is usually fine for a lot of things. So this is a very different type of data, and SQL Server just wasn't built for it. It wasn't made for this at all. So we're trying to basically put the square peg in the round hole, and that's the challenge here. And this has always been a challenge, and I've seen surprising amounts of JSON, and this isn't about XML, but XML is a similar challenge. I've seen lots and lots of that over the years stored in MySQL, SQL Server, other database servers, and it's the same problem everywhere. It's just no one knows how the best way is to store it, and so it's stored as a string. So why do we do this? Why would anybody do this? Why would we put JSON in a relational database? We should all know better, right? Why would anybody do it? And the answer is that we often have to. We don't get a choice. Very often applications use JSON, and they store things in JSON, and they want to put it in the database and pull it out of the database. And the alternative, which for them is much, much harder, is take the JSON document, shred it into columns and rows and stuff, then put that all into SQL Server, and then when you're done, pull it back out, reconstitute it into JSON, and then it's a JSON doc. And that's a lot of work. So for any developer, anybody wanting to build a system and not have it be even less efficient than this, storing the JSON as a big old document makes more sense in SQL Server than to have to break it apart and store the data bits in there. And of course, we don't have a JSON data type in the past, so what do? We store it, well, not like these kinds of strings, but we store it as strings, right? And that's all we had, var and var. We do something like this. We'll say, okay, store it as a big string, and that's fine, except that in SQL Server, your options to deal with strings, to filter on them, group by them, things like that are really hard. Indexing them is hard unless you happen to have what you're looking for at the beginning of the string. They're hard to optimize. You can use full text, but full text is a whole other can of worms. Not easy to use. It consumes a bunch of space, uses lots of memory. You got to use string manipulations. So now you have char index, pad index, substring, and all that good stuff. It's hard to work with. It's not very fun either. So pulling this apart isn't great. It's a lot of work. It's inefficient. So let's just quickly jump into demo because demos are fun. We're going to go into, this is my local SQL Server instance right here on my laptop. Please don't fail me now. So just going to quickly demo what JSON looked like before. And so what you would do is just declare a string, var CarMax, var CarMax done. Fill it up with whatever you're going to put inside of it, like this, and I can do a JSON function on it. I can do something like this and it'll work. Oops, let's just check for an error or something, and no error and we're fine. But that's it. You can put into a table. You can have multiple records like this. Same idea. I can just run a query on it. I'll get back what I want. It's valid. It has 2 records. Great. I can make a table like this with a little bit of metadata and then this JSON document. And I can go ahead and insert data into it like this. Put my JSON into SQL Server as a string, just like that. And I can, then do things like check is it valid. I can check, which of them has a city for Albany. And this is not a presentation about how these functions work. I've written articles about it. Feel free to check them out if you'd like to. We don't have time for that anyway. This is supposed to be fun. We don't want to dive into functions right now. And we run this and we get back the row we expect, the 1 person here in the list from Albany. You can see it parse the JSON. And of course, when I say parse the JSON, what I really mean is clustered index scan, right? That's exactly what this is. There's nothing else. There's no secret behind this. The only way you can parse this string and pull this out is through a clustered index scan. It's the scanniest thing ever, pretty much, right? You couldn't be more scanny if you tried. So there we go. This is what JSON used to be like, and you would just take documents, shred them apart, and rip out what you need. And it was expensive. It was potentially slow. If I had 1 million rows in this table, it wouldn't be so fast. We'd all be waiting right now. And I don't know about you, but I don't really enjoy waiting. So let's not do too much waiting today. So snuck into Azure SQL Database back in May of this year. It's still in preview as of right now. I checked right before this just in case. I don't want to get, embarrassed by the fact that they just put it into out of preview right before this. This data type provides native support. So not only is it just native stored as a binary in SQL Server, it's already pre-parsed for you. So the different pieces of the JSON document are already taken apart for you. It uses much less space than strings do. You get far better performance out of the box, even with no additional optimizations. You get better performance, less resources used. It's available in all compatibility levels, and presumably this will be available in all editions. I assume this will come to on-prem at some point soon, whenever the next version is, but it's in all compatibility levels, and that's wonderful. The beauty of this is that it doesn't require any code changes. Whatever code you already have that does scary JSON stuff, you can simply change the var CarMax to JSON and keep doing all your scary JSON stuff, and it works great. That's a huge deal. So no changes needed. Just keep doing what you're doing, and it will get faster and better. And that's really nice. There are no native JSON indexes yet. This is still a preview kind of thing, but you can make them include columns if you want. I suspect there will be indexing in the future. I would be shocked if there wasn't. But this is already an improvement over what we already have, and I'm all for improvement. So this is a great step. I'm really happy with it. And it's, for those of us who need to use JSON, this is important because it's here now. So if you don't use JSON, you can just remember that it's here if you need it, because it will be everywhere soon. It's very, very likely. And of course, more live demo, because I love live demo and just, the joys of things. So this is me connected to my my test server on Azure SQL Database. You can see that right there. So we're going to go ahead and just take a look. And I can do the same things I did earlier. I can just create a scalar, make it. Now notice it's a JSON. It's a JSON. That was cool, right? And you can just do that. And so I'm going to put in some stuff and just check, is it valid? And it works. And uh-oh, am I not connected? Did my connection die? Is this what happens when I do a live demo? All right, well, that's embarrassing. We'll deal with it. Let's reconnect. And if this doesn't work, we'll just keep going because that's life, right? These things happen. Let's connect. We will go up here and check really quick and see, is Azure SQL Database running? The answer is yes. Okay. We're going to give us a few more moments, and then I'm just going to walk through the code because I don't want to waste your time. And that's just how this is. So awesome. Well, that's unfortunate. I was connected about 5 minutes before we started. Oh well, let's just go ahead then. That is life. These things happen. New places, new things. So what we can do is same things as earlier. I could check is it a valid JSON and it'll work against the JSON data type just like normal, no problems. We can create a table like this, and note there's some cool stuff here. We have a JSON document here, JSON, not null, and I put a constraint on it. This is a new thing in 2022. This particular JSON path exists, but you can do things like this and say, all right, make this a JSON, add a check constraint to check for the first name path. And therefore, if we put in insert data that has a first name, it'll work. See, this is just like a live demo. I can just talk out what the results would be. It'll be fine. And then we continue on down. But if I were to do this one, it would throw an error message. I would try to insert it. I would get a check constraint violation, and that's good. So you can have a little bit of data integrity on your JSON if you need it to check, is it valid? Are certain paths there? Things like that. You can use any JSON function you want as part of the constraint. And that's a pretty cool feature. And it's pretty fast too, because it's native JSON. It's a little faster than when you have a giant glob of text. Here's our same table as earlier. Now this is kind of an important thing to note, that everything's the same here, except I just changed VAR car to JSON. That was it. I didn't make anything else different. And we can go here and just see I'm inserting data into it, just like earlier, and it's going to work fine. I can pull out and check, is it valid? I can grab specific values out now, and everything here is going to be faster. Everything's going to run a little bit faster. It's going to perform a little bit better because it's stored in native format. It's no longer a giant glob of string that has to get top to bottom, ripped apart. I can get values out for city or state. I can grab other information, JSON values. I can check, is it valid, and check in the where clause where the city is Albany. I can do all sorts of things like this, and it's pretty cool. I can modify. So if I don't want to change it, I can just put the modify up here, and I can adjust the city, or the state to London, things like that, where there's a certain value. And so a lot of this, none of this is rocket science here. This is all just updating, modifying, but I'm doing it against native JSON, which is pretty cool. So it's faster. And I can continue just kind of showing all the different things we can do here. We can modify, we can where clause. You can do things like this too. So one trick for JSON, if you don't have Azure SQL Database, if you're not in a newer version, is you can pull out specific columns that are critical for searches. And so you'll store your JSON document, and you'll keep a column or two for like last name, or I don't know, phone number, if you're going to search them really often. And then you can index those and use them, and it's not so bad. You can do modify. You can add data on to existing documents. There's really a lot you can do with JSON and SQL Server, and honestly, I didn't know you can do all of this until like the past year, because I had to use it, which is the great lesson in life, right? You learn a lot when you have to use it. But you can do basically the equivalent of inserts, updates, and deletes directly in the JSON, and then assign it to a column like you would in the update. So the update statement is just an update statement, but this is actually going in and mucking with the JSON, modifying it, and adding additional skills to the list of skills. I added mustaches, because Nikola Tesla had a pretty cool mustache, right? So one other note is this is in preview, and you can't do everything in preview. For example, if I try to do a subquery like this, I will get an error message. There's a lot of things you can't cross-apply OpenJSON. There's a lot of little things you can't quite do yet in Azure SQL Database, but you'll be able to soon. So do keep in mind there's a few quirky limitations that we can't do. So like all of these are things that simply just don't work yet. But that's okay. We can still do a lot of other things. And so you can still work with it in other ways and make it work. You don't have to have a subquery with a JSON clause in it. That's fine. So I have lots more JSON here. I'm just going to show one more thing before I jump back. You can add computed columns, and that's pretty cool too. So what this really does mean is an extension to what I said earlier. If you're in Azure SQL Database and you have the JSON data type, you can have your document, and you can then create a computed column and then index it. So a column from the JSON document can be pulled out, added to a computed column, indexed, and now it can perform really nicely. Or just available as a column for simplicity's sake to make your code easier. I can go on all day with this stuff, but we don't want to go on all day. It'll stop being fun, and I do want this to be fun. So let's jump on back in. So I want to wrap up on time. That's always a good thing. And just basically say that native JSON is in every way better than storing JSON in strings. There's no question about it. It is a superior way to store. There's some limitations, It's in preview, of course, but those will be gone soon, and there'll be a lot of improvements as well. The big key to all this is no code changes are needed. So whatever you have out there, it'll just keep working, which is really, really nice. It uses less storage, less memory, you get better performance. It's like a win-win all around, which is really what you want. String manipulation is expensive. JSON manipulation, I wouldn't call it cheap, but it is cheaper when it's native. My estimate will be it'll be coming to on-premises at some point. To premises, all right, whatever. I typed it this morning, but it'll be an on-premises SQL Server soon, which is wonderful. And when it's here, everybody can use it. It'll probably be every edition, every compatibility level, and so if you need it, if you store JSON in SQL Server, use it. If you already have code that uses VAR CarMax and VAR CarMax, test out changing to JSON. You'll probably get better performance. And there you have it. So here's me. I'll make sure that all my contact info gets out afterwards so everybody can find me, bother me, hassle me, ask questions, things like that. But there you have it. Thank you very much for joining me this morning on a Saturday. Well, this is afternoon for many of you, very early in the morning for me, but that's cool. So thank you very much for having me.